Now, Craig, you are with us. I see your smiling face there. Just take yourself off mute. I might just
How's
go
that?
ahead and get you started
Yep.
on talking about the real estate situation. So for those of you who know Leverage and know Craig, Craig's been a supporter and been around the IFBF for many, many, many years, is an excellent speaker and loves to talk real estate and other things. He's one of the head trainers at the moment with Leverage Solicitors now, and has championed over the last few years, brokers getting their real estate license, if for no other reason than to have that extra credential, but to be able to facilitate real estate transactions for your clients. And we had some legislative changes last year that took effect. I'm not sure, Craig, was it March of this year?
Correct, PJ. And how's the sound? All right? Because I'm in quite a
sound
noisy
is good.
place.
Yep, sound
Okay.
is good. There's a little bit of background noise, but I'm sure once you start talking, your mic will probably
It'll be
pick you
okay.
up. Yep. But
All right,
anyway,
so
I wanted to get Craig on because of the changes. So for anyone who is in the IFBF that has a real estate license that didn't avail themselves of the easy transition that was available to get a Class 1 license, Craig's probably going to talk about that. And of course, just give us a broad update on all of that. So Craig, over to you. Do you need control to do any slides, or are you just going to?
No, I'm just going to speak to the camera. So first of all, thank you very much, PJ, for facilitating the meeting and inviting me along. I wanted to personally, PJ, I came across some articles about you winning an MFAA State Excellence Award. So I don't know who knows about that, but well done.
Oh, everybody knows, mate. I don't hold those things back. Yeah, they all know. Well, trust me. But thank you for reminding everyone. For those of you that didn't get the memo, I won an award.
Well done, buddy. Well done. I think you do us all proud. So in terms of this topic, which is an update on the changes, and I'm going to try and spin it so that it's reference to brokers and planners and perhaps accountants who are the main members of the IFBF. So just to start off with, there was a change of legislation. I'm sure you've heard that, but just to make sure, those that may not have, 23rd of the 3rd this year, the world changed for real estate. And in summary, and again, I'm just going to pare it down because there's a big topic and there's hours and hours and hours of CPD that brokers and agents can avail themselves of. But in very simple terms, what the Act has done is it's reduced the number of licenses from 6 to 3. So in New South Wales, we now only have real estate agents, stock and station agents, and strata managers. Now, the group of our colleagues, being brokers, they are mainly going to be interested in being real estate agents. And that category of license has expanded, PJ. It includes now business broking. It includes on-site residential property management, which is to do with building rights. And it also includes buyer's agency. So all those licenses that used to be separate, they're now all combined into one. And if you had a license before the magic date on the 23rd of the 3rd, you're going to have what's called a limited license, limited to what you were doing before the change. If you are a new entrant to the industry, then you're going to have a very substantial scope on your license. So, and by the way, look, if there's questions, maybe, I don't know, you want to keep until the end, PJ, but I'll let you moderate that.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Just quickly on the questions, if you do have some questions for Craig, you can drop them in the chat and I can moderate, or by all means, yeah, you can just, you can ask them. So, yeah, all right. No worries.
So the big, firstly, the date of the change. Secondly, that there's been a reduction in licenses. The other thing that's big news is that they've introduced 3 levels of authority. And this is going to be very relevant to brokers on the call, PJ, because they've introduced level 1, level 2, and an assistant agent. So unlike any other state in the country, all of whom operate on a 2-level authority, we have 3. And this makes mutual recognition clunky. It also means that there are certain functions that only Class 1 can do, and there are certain functions that Class 2 can do. And there's a restriction on the sorts of things that an assistant agent can do. So they are very big changes. And unless you're focused on the industry like I happen to be, it might slip your attention. So point to make is that if you hold a license, you should have a look at yourself on the OFT website. You should look yourself up and you should determine and be clear in your mind what authority level you have. And if you want, I can provide that information to you as to where to look if you're interested. The other thing that it has done is it's increased the level of training required. A lot of the people on this call, by virtue of Warren Jacobs and other people that have, and Stephen and yourself, PJ, and this saying, were encouraged to get their license before the magic date, took advantage of a situation where you could get your license in a number of weeks and no experience required. You could then become a fully fledged agent, open up an office, buy yourself a franchise, all done. Those days are gone, no more. The only way you can enter real estate now is coming into the bottom level, assistant agent, and they have now introduced what they call pathways. And so there are very distinct pathways to move from entry level up to class 2 and then up to class 1. And these pathways have 3 requirements basically: time, experience, and qualification. And so to move between the various levels, you've got to have done certain training, diplomas or Cert 4, depending on which level you're going to. You must have kept a logbook. They've reintroduced logbooks. And they've also required that you substantiate how much time that you've spent in that role. So the days of leapfrogging from pastry chef to real estate agent are gone. You're gonna, the journey from entry level to class 1 is probably 3 or so years, okay? Now, it's unlikely that people on this call are going to be wanting to go on that pathway. I think a lot of the interest on this call, PJ, is going to be around grandfathering, which I'll get to. I'll just finish off the broad summary, so to speak. And the reason I'm going through it slowly is because a lot of your colleagues who've been in real estate will say to you, no, that's wrong. That can't be right. What do you know, where did you get that information from? So be aware that there's going to be a whole troop of dinosaurs out there that have been living under the rock. And then you're going to be you guys who know what you're talking about and who are abreast of things, because there are very big changes. So increased education requirements, I've mentioned that. There are also increased ongoing education requirements. In the past, it was somewhat of a rort. You would just get your points, you jump online, you smash it out in a couple of minutes, and you know, no one cared. But the OFT have introduced compulsory topics, and they've introduced elective topics. And they've also made sure that if you have a class 1 license, that you're also going to be required to have business-related ongoing training. So it's at least going to be 9 hours if you're the top level. Like, for example, PJ. I know for a fact PJ has a class 1. I know Stephen has a class 1, just of a few colleagues. And you guys are going to end up needing 9 hours. Now, look, 9 hours isn't that bad. I mean, 9 hours compared to what brokers need to do and solicitors, etc., is still quite inexpensive in terms of time and money. But nonetheless, it's compulsory. And then there's electives as well. The other point that I wanted to make to everyone here is that there's been a significant change to the role of the licensee in charge in respect of trust monies. One of the reasons why they introduced these new laws that have been a long time in the making is because there's been a significant rise in trust account defalcations, which means that the New South Wales public purse has been bleeding quite badly for a long time. So the government decided we're going to stop all this. We're going to increase the level of education. We're going to make it more difficult for people to progress. And we are going to make very strict rules around who can manage and touch trust money. And very importantly, who can authorize a withdrawal. This is probably one of the biggest changes for established agents out there. Oftentimes you'll have an agent who's run a business for 20 or so years, takes Friday and Monday off for golf and leaves the business in the hands of their trusted worker. All finished, all gone, no more delegation. You cannot delegate anymore any of the functions of a class 1 license holder to anybody else unless they also have a class 1. So this has introduced a whole new concept called bench playing. So if I went into business with PJ, and PJ was the licensee in charge, and he went on holiday and decided not to manage that business remotely, which he could, he would have to nominate someone else of a class 1, and that might be me. And then while he's away, I'm the kahuna. It's me. He doesn't ring me up and say, hey, Craig, can you do this? I say, no, PJ, I'm the boss. I'm the class 1. So there's a real radical difference now there, and that will be something that older practitioners won't really comprehend necessarily, whereas new practitioners will. Now, this also gives an opportunity. If anyone out there is looking for an alternate income stream and perhaps is trying to move away from broking or trying to augment their income, there's a whole new industry being developed out there whereby you with a class 1 could offer your services as a manager to people who are running a business. And this is the very first time in the history of regulated agency in the state where they have quite intentionally separated ownership and management. Up until now, real estate has been a cottage industry. You've owned and managed, and if you're the kahuna that owns it, you're probably also the manager. Those two skills aren't always the same. And so now there's an opportunity with this new legislation. They've created a new license category called principal licensee, effectively the owner. So I could go into business. I, Craig Swan, could have no license, but I go and buy my LJ Hooker Albury. I buy the company, I buy the business. I have no license. I would then find myself a PJ or a Stephen, and I would then engage with them and employ them and pay them or whatever, consult with them. And so it's allowed a real estate to go to a next level. You can be an owner, not a manager, because managing a real estate office, and I'm getting to how this is relevant to brokers, is far more heavy duty. There's far more risk involved. There are far more penalties involved. And I wanted to make this point, I wanted to lead into this point because a lot of the people on this call have a license and they do run a small business, or they certainly receive income. And the way that the OST views that and the way that the ATO views that is that you are in business. And as a consequence, there are ramifications about what sort of license you should have. So I'll come to that in due course. So I think I've covered the main points that I wanted to cover. And I now want to focus, unless there are any questions, on the class 1, class 2 dichotomy. PJ, am I still there?
I do. Yeah. I do have a hand up from Louise.
Yeah.
Did you want
Yeah,
to?
Louise.
Oh, well.
Oh, no, that was from before, but it's all good.
Oh,
Keep going, Craig.
no
This is very
worries.
interesting.
Okay. So look, there is much more. Thanks, Louise. There's much more that I could cover, but I want to try and tailor this for brokers and planners whose main thing is not real estate. Okay. So my clear understanding from being around brokers and agents for a very long time is that mostly on this call are brokers who either receive income because they refer clients to the likes of Meridian, etc., or they are engaged in selling a property themselves, either one, right? Now, you could have availed yourself of a license before the 23rd of the 3rd, and the idea of that was to get your license and then to become a class 1 so that you could then have maximum options. Okay, now some of you did that. Some of you followed the instructions, got a personal license, formed a company, linked the two, and then by the time the 23rd arrived, you were rolled over into class 1 magically. It was magic, okay? Then there was a group of people like myself and others who had held a license for more than 2 years before that date. And people like myself and others could say, because I held my license for 2 years before the 23rd of 3rd, I also want a class 1, please give it to me, which is, so that's the second category of what we call grandfathering, right? And those were the only two available up until about 2 days ago. And I mentioned this to PJ when he rang me to say, you know, would I be interested in talking? Is that I said, look, I'm probably going to have some bad news, if you remember, PJ, because there's going to be people on this call who I'll explain do need a class 1, and there's no way of getting it unless you follow the new pathway, which is time, experience, and qualifications, which is a butt ache. Okay, and they'll go, well, I thought I did that. I thought I did all that before the 23rd. And I can guarantee you there will be people on this call who will say, but I thought I did what I was supposed to do. You know, I thought I did my license like Leverage said, and I got a class. Well, how come I'm not a class 1? And that is because there was a little hop, skip, and a jump that you had to do. And those people ostensibly have fallen short of the mark. Now, we are dealing with the Office of Fair Trading regularly, as you can imagine. And we are talking to them regularly on behalf of clients. And what has come to our attention is what I would classify as an unofficial additional way of getting a class 1. And it does require certain requirements to be met. And so rather than broadcast it here, because sometimes it's a shade of gray, what I'm saying to people is, if you need a class 1 and you don't have a class 1, and you can check yourself out on the OFT website and see whether you do or don't, right? Then you must come and talk to us, and we will be happy to offer you a complimentary short interview. And if we think we can help you circumvent the long way around by giving you a shortcut, a legitimate shortcut, that will turn into legal advice, and we'll take it further if you want to, okay? So I just before I launch into the final bit of the talk, can you tell me when I'm going too far, PJ?
No, you're
then
good.
just
You're
remember,
good.
yeah, just remember that if you've missed out on being a class 1 on rollover, like PJ, that was a licensee in charge of a business on that date, or you've missed out on the fact that you didn't have your license for 2 years prior to because you just didn't have it, right? And now you're thinking, well, you know, I'm just going to have to trade illegally because I really do need a class 1. Then come and talk to us, okay? And if we think we can help you, we will progress the matter with your permission and we'll engage with you formally, okay? Now, the final bit of the conversation that I wanted to put out there is this, okay? If you're a broker and you are receiving money from the likes of Meridian and other people, which is a commission share, you are deemed to be an agent. I think we've had this conversation many, many, many times. Or if you are doing the conventional thing where you are representing a vendor. In other words, and I hear this all the time, you'll be a broker and you've come across a builder developer. That builder developer says to you, hey, PJ, hey, Louise, hey, Stephen, why don't you sell my stuff for me? Okay, you are effectively a vendor's agent. You are acting as an agent, right? So in any of those situations, whether you're receiving a referral fee or acting as an agent, or you're acting as a buyer's agent, where your clients, you've got them a pre-approval and they've said, hey, PJ, you know a lot about property. Can you get me a property, please? Okay, now, and I will pay you. And I will pay you. Either client will pay you, or PJ might say, don't worry, Mr. Client, I'll get paid by the vendor. Doesn't matter how you get paid. Any of those situations, you are, sadly, if you don't really want to be, you are acting as an agent. So assuming that we all understand that bit of it, the next thing is this. Most of you operate independently. Most of you operate as a sort of a sole trader or a small business, right? Which means that you're not employed. Or if you are employed, you're employed by your company. Okay, so either way, there's going to be somebody in your structure, something in your structure that's going to be the agent, okay? And that entity or person, because you're independent, there has to be a licensee in charge. So for every business that comes within the definition of real estate, be it sole trader, partnership, or corporation, that business vehicle is considered to be an agent, and that vehicle, partnership or individual or business, must be licensed. Of course, pause, if you want to be compliant. All of this is predicated on, do you want to be compliant? Because there's lots of cowboys, right? And if you want to run around non-compliant, of course, you know, that's an option, okay? So if you want to be compliant and you're running a business along the lines I've talked about, you need to have or be able to point to a licensee in charge. And under the new regime, that licensee in charge can only be a human being, an individual. And that individual must have a class 1. And so I'm in a long way around, I'm saying most of you out there, in my opinion, almost exclusively are going to need a class 1. Please remember that. Please be very clear that the OFT has got renewed resources. They've got renewed energy. They've got a new act. They've got a new minister. They've got new compliance objectives, and they are, and I can tell you for sure, there's 2 areas that they've spotted that they're going to be looking at closely. One is ethnic-based agencies, in other words, Chinese-oriented businesses, because they've got a Mandarin speaker on board now. And they're also going to be targeting, and they've said it very plainly, accountants, mortgage brokers, and financial planners who are selling property. They've made it very plain. So look, without wanting to sound too heavy going, that is what I would want to hear if I was you as a broker wanting an update on the changes, PJ. So if there's any questions now, I mean, I'm happy to go deeper onto some of those topics, but that would be the 4 corners of what I wanted to say, PJ.
Okay, thank you. Well, we do have a question from Nissan, and I think it'll be a fairly easy answer, but he's basically asking, what's the difference between a class 1 license and a standard real estate license?
Okay,
I don't think the standard license exists anymore.
I don't know what a standard license is. So a class 1. So, well, I think maybe Nissan means that what used to be a license in the old world, you were either licensed or you were a certificate of registration holder in the old world. If you were a license holder Nissan in the old world and you did nothing about it, then you would be a class 2. And a class 2 agent, Nissan, is able to do everything necessary. Remember, there's going to be a limitation. If you were a license holder in the old regime, they'll roll you across into the new regime based on what you were limited to do. So I would suggest, Nissan, if I looked at you and you were not a class 1, you would be class 2, limited to sales and leasing, because that's what your old license allowed you to do, because the new real estate license is much broader. So if I go through the new regime as a fresh-faced new agent, and I graduate with my new course, I will simply be called real estate agent, full stop. I can do all, meaning I can buy, sell, manage property. I can buy, sell, manage businesses, on-site residential, the whole 2D. In your case, Nissan, your old license, I'm assuming, if you were a real estate agent in the old world, you would simply be class 2 real estate agent, limited to sales and leasing. And the limitation, Nissan, is this. I know what you do broadly in terms of broking and property and what have you. You need to be a class 1. I don't know whether you are or not, but you do need to be a class 1. So
I was just going to ask about that, Craig. So if you are class 2 and all you can do is
Yep.
sales and leasing, does that then you must have a licensee in charge in order to receive a commission?
No, PJ, and that's where it gets a bit weird. So a class 2 person, if I am paying you, if I'm Meridian and I'm paying you your commission for introducing somebody to me, right? The fact that your license means I'm compliant. I'm paying you. The law says I must only share with the licensee. You're fine. But on your side, when they come around to say, well, PJ Real Estate, right? That's great. You're licensed. Who's the licensee in charge here, PJ? Oh, it's me. Oh, how can you be licensed in charge when you're only class 2? That's how it'll work. And you go,
Right.
oh, so every business must have a class 1 somewhere that they can point to, who is going to have their head chopped off if things go bad.
Right.
That's the whole point. Bailey, my colleague, often says we want one set of ghoulies to chop off. That's the way the OFT are looking at it.
Right.
And there are other implications of trust accounting, which I won't bother you with now because it's a very deep topic, but in simple terms, that would answer your question. So this is a compliance issue. Now there is plans afoot, I must say to you, for those people on a class 2 who don't want to be a class 1 or cannot become a class 1. Of course, those people's inability to become a class 1 has shrunk considerably based on what we've just found out, okay? So there is, for you guys on the call, there'd hardly be anyone who would not be available or able to avail themselves of what we've just found out. So if you have a business registered, sole trader partnership or corporation, and you held a license, your individual license, before the 23rd of the 3rd, there's a high probability we can help you become class 1. Let me give you that much, okay? So there really shouldn't be any reason why anyone on this call should need to be worried about running around in the shadows class 2, avoiding class 1 because it's so hard to get. But if that was the case, PJ, then you would need to be mindful it's non-compliant. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's making sense because it is kind of complicated, but I'm hoping I'm being,
it is a little bit tricky,
clear.
and I know there are, there's quite a number of our members that do have or have had real estate licenses. So it sounds like there's 2 things that everyone who has a license or has had a license should do. The first one is to go to the Office of Fair Trading website, and I will get a link from you that we can put on the IFBF website or send out to everybody so that you can go and check. I've done that.
Yourself.
I don't know the link. It's really easy though. You just punch in a few things and it'll come up and say, green light,
This is what you've got.
or whatever. Yep.
Yes, that's
and
right.
the second thing is if once you check, if you don't get the answer that you thought you wanted, to give you a call or leverage a call to then get a complimentary review of
interview. And if we say, Stephen or Jack, we think we can help you, then that's referred on to the legal team, and they will knuckle down and give you a quote on what they, how much. Yeah, it'll be a modest amount of legal fees if you decide to go that way, right? It'll be a modest. Sorry about that. There might have been a bit of a break in the transmission there. So if you do decide to go any further with wanting help, it'll probably translate into a very modest sort of legal engagement, if that makes sense.
And if I suppose if you don't do that and you choose to be a cowboy, we know that the OFT is now out there doing more enforcement. So what's probably the minimum level of fine that you would be up for?
Okay, the minimum level of fine, if the new inspectors are all forensically trained, all the new inspectors, by the way, that came on board as the Act was reviewed, they're all federal police. They're all forensic detectives, okay? So we trained them up in real estate, so they've now got a real estate background. The minimum fine that you probably can expect is about $11,000 because it's about 100 penalty points multiplied by the value of a penalty point, $110, so about that. Now, again, I don't want to scare people, PJ, because the OFT have said that for the next several months up until, say, November, they will be what they call educative. So they will find you and they'll go, naughty, you should know better. Yep. And if you didn't know, now you do now fix it up. So there is definitely a grace period. If it's something substantial, obviously not, but it's things like we've talked about, oh, I didn't know, I needed a class, I thought it was a class one, oh, do I really need a class one? I get this often, right? I'll give you a quick example. I get a lot of buyer's agents saying to me, oh, I'm a buyer's agent and I'm not going to run a trust account, so therefore I've been told I don't need a class one.
Right.
Bollocks. Absolute. I don't know where it comes from. I actually did a small video on that the other day, and I sent it off to the OFT, and I said, "Does this sound right?" And they said, "Well, it doesn't sound wrong." Okay, that's the OFT's answer for you. Okay, so there's no wiggle room here, right? So if that helps, PJ. And by the way, I'm happy to field any calls from members as long as I can get back to you, because sometimes it's a bit difficult because of training and stuff. But I'm happy to, because it can be difficult. It can be complicated.
So I think the long and short of it is, and thank you very much, Craig, for that quick appraisal of what is going on in the real estate industry. The long and short of it, guys, is if you have any doubt about whether you have the right licensing, give Craig a call and maybe have a quick conversation. I still think it's worth, and I'm sure for those of us who have our real estate licenses, even though I really haven't used it at all in the last probably 18 months to 24 months, it's something that I want to retain. I went to the effort of getting it, so I don't necessarily I didn't want to let it just, go to waste. But I'm sure there will be times when it'll be very handy to have it and to use it. So, as part of our IFBF mantra, we talk about diversification. I think the things that are to the left and to the right of mortgage broking are the easiest things to get involved in. Real estate is clearly, a sister organization, a sister industry that we have to always know about. And then there's all the other stuff that we talk about too, like asset finance and things like that. But anyway, any questions for Craig?
Yeah, happy to answer them. Yeah.
PJ and Craig, thanks very much. Look, I just want, not a question, but I did just want to say a public and open thank you to Craig, because it was over the course of the end of last year and the beginning of this year that he very patiently with his support, I have now got my Class 1 and corporate license.
Well done.
So thank you, Craig, and along with a number of other of my IFBF colleagues. And I could very highly recommend, if you're looking for a great way to get educated with somebody with a great depth of knowledge and an incredible way of delivering it, Craig's your man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Craig.
Very much appreciate those comments.
I can second that. It's Dilek here. Craig was so helpful. Yeah, hi.
Hi, Dilek.
Yeah, Craig was so helpful. So yeah, if you're looking at going down this path, know that you'll be highly supported. So thanks,
That's
Craig.
very, very kind of you, Dilek. Thank you so much, guys. I'm blushing. I'm blushing.
Well, Craig, it looks like you have you'll have a few beers that you need to buy, or some checks you'll have to post off after this meeting. The one thing I think is, it just occurred to me too, guys, that it sounds like, Craig has been a little bit of a Debbie Downer on some things, but the reality is that I think the opportunity in real estate is still very much alive. And so don't be discouraged by anything that you might be hearing. If you were thinking about getting a license and you just didn't have time or whatever, and you missed that really juicy window of opportunity to do it, don't be afraid of getting stuck into doing the license and just going through the new process. Yes, you will have to do and you might just speak to that very briefly, Craig. You will have to do a bit more work, and you'll have to mentor or be under responsible manager or whatever for a little bit, but it's probably still worth doing. So maybe just touch on that real quick.
I'll say something that could be controversial, and I'll warn you how to use it. Okay, for those that may be brand new to this whole story and have sort of woken up and gone, whoa, hang on, what's all this about? Yes, in New South Wales, the pathway towards getting a Class 1 would mean that you enter as an assistant agent, you do a 2-Saturday course, Saturday in our case, right? You then do your 5 modules, you finish, and you can now become registered. The clock starts to tick. You've got to work for someone, as PJ said, you've got to actually work for someone. You've got to be paid, you've got to keep a logbook, and you've got to continue training until you get your Cert 4 done. And then at that point, as long as you've spent 12 months in the industry, but not more than 4 years, 12 months minimum, 4 years maximum, then you're allowed to apply to become Class 2. Now, Class 2 means that you are now an autonomous worker. You still have to be a worker because you can't run your own business, remember, because you're not Class 1. Most people will be Class 2. Most people in the industry out there will be Class 2. And if you want to, and that would have essentially have taken you 12 months minimum, 4 years maximum. You've got your Cert 4, you've done your logbook, and life is good, and you're working for someone. But you guys and my friends at the IFBF, you don't work for people, you work for yourself. So Class 2 won't work for you. Class 2 will not work for you. You're going to have to go one more step. You're going to have to hang out there at Class 2 for 24 months, keep a logbook, and upgrade to a diploma. And so effectively, from woe to go, A to Z, brand new person in New South Wales, it's essentially a 3-year journey, which will involve a Cert 4 with a diploma upgrade plus time. So in a nutshell. Now, what I'm about to say, you need to handle very carefully because I've been warned.
Should I stop recording the meeting, Craig?
I've been warned that this is a delicate one, okay? So be careful, okay? Under mutual recognition, it is possible to get a license in another jurisdiction that does not require all the effort of New South Wales, okay? And in that other jurisdiction, you could get your license quickly and without experience, and then you can come knocking on the door of New South Wales and present yourself and say, I've got a license in this jurisdiction. May I have one of yours, please, okay? So if that's going to be what you want to do, come and talk to me first, right? Because there are a few little bits and pieces there you need to be aware of. So PJ, you asked me to talk about now, what happens now. There is I want to stay in New South Wales and do it the way of New South Wales, which is essentially a 3-year journey, study, diplomas and Cert 4s. Or if you're in a super big hurry and you understand the risks involved, there is another pathway that might suit you that involves mutual recognition, and it's costly, and it has got some risks that you'd need to know about. So I hope so treat that one very carefully. And if you want to pursue the mutual recognition via another state pathway, it's not my first choice for you, but it works for some people. I hope that makes sense, guys.
Great. Thank you, Craig. And again, we'll get some links out to everyone, and please do feel free to reach out to Craig. Craig, your email address is Craig S.
Is CRAIG, Craig S for Swan, Craig S at leveragegroup.com.au.
Perfect.
Would be the easiest one. And then I will then get back to you. Just bear in mind that sometimes like many of you, it just might take me a while, just maybe a couple of days sometimes to respond. Thank you all for your very, very generous comments. Thanks, PJ, for allowing me to talk. It's always good to join you guys. I always say to my colleagues and friends, the happiest hunting ground I've ever had in my whole career is the IFBF. You guys are great. You guys are doing a great job. You've got a good leadership there, and I wish you well. So I'll dial off, PJ. Is that all right?
That's fine, Craig. Thank you so much for joining us. Give a bit of a clap for Craig. Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Craig.
All the best, guys. Happy hunting.
Now we're right on morning tea. So I see Pete is sitting there very patiently. Peter White has been very patiently sitting there, ready to go. We might just take a 5-minute break, and then Peter will start. We'll start as soon as we have the 5-minute break. So it's 11:37. back in the room, guys, at 11:42, if I've done my maths right, and we'll kick off with Peter White. So we'll see you shortly. All right, everyone, welcome back to the IFBF meeting. Looks like Nissen has got a disco going on in his place. Not sure if he's somewhere in that sea of, I don't know what that's, pink or purple or what. Anyway, very happy to have Peter White joining us today to talk with us about what's going on, I guess, in his world from the FBAA's perspective. We're just going to kind of do a bit of a Q&A, a bit of duck and weave. We'll just, have a flow and kind of see where the conversation takes us. So just a reminder, guys, please, if you do have any questions for Pete, just drop them in the chat. I've had a quick scan. I don't really see any, but they could be right at the back now. So you can just drop them in there again. And of course, at some stage, we'll open it up for questions as well. You just put your hand up or take yourself off mute and do that. But welcome, Peter White. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, PJ. I really appreciate you having us along, and good day, everyone, and trust you're all keeping well.
We are keeping well. We opened up the meeting as we usually do with a bit of a chit chat about the post-COVID world and what businesses are going to do. It sounds to me like many of our brokers are finding tons of opportunity out there. Lori Parks, who is out in Bathurst, was remarking that he's got about $12 million on the go at the moment in loans, which is huge. Apparently it's going off in Bathurst. I've been thinking about it for the last hour, and I'm considering moving out there. So, it's really going off. But
PJ, that's not an uncommon conversation, PJ. I must admit that talking to people, brokers around the country, the amount of people a common commentary is, I haven't been this busy for 2 years. And it's not busy spinning wheels in the mud. It's making money, and there's a bit of care and nurture for those that are suffering with COVID issues and a little bit of stimulus. But it's actually a really good thing to see. And one of the valuable pieces of this is, as we go forward into a review in 2022, which is run by the ACCC and the Council of Financial Regulators, back on commissions and remunerations. This is one of the things, and we've been working with various aggregators, collate all this data, keep records of it, because it's testament to what brokers do in this period, and why there is a value of being paid trial. One, it's an entitlement anyhow when you look at the legal structure of everything, but this is what keeps brokers going, to be able to continue to support borrowers right across Australia. It's a really great thing, and for such a bad set of circumstances as COVID, it's actually quite a good thing for our industry, and as far as it proves the value proposition. We knew it, but letting them know it.
Indeed, I think I 100% agree with you. I've certainly been very busy, and many of our members have lamented the fact that they've been very busy. And one of the things I do want to touch on today is commissions, and of course talking about that, not just trail, but also clawback, because I've got a very interesting, well, I don't know if it's an interesting question, but I've got just a few things on that. But why don't we kick off at a high level with something you were just talking about there, which was, it really boils down to, I think, this best interest duty stuff that's coming in, and the fact that brokers now are going to be able to really differentiate themselves as offering a tremendous value over just going directly to your bank. So if you want to maybe just talk about best interest duty, any updates on that, anything from your perspective that we need to know?
Yeah, well, PJ, you're bang on. I mean, the best interest duty, I spoke with, I don't know if anybody watching, I do a thing every fortnight now. We used to do a weekly called Q&A with Whitey. We spoke a little bit on that yesterday, but I've always believed that our broker market penetration to originator loans has got an easy opportunity to get to 70%, and in my head, potentially to 80%. We look at the UK market and brokers over there, they're 70 to 72% already and have been for a while. And there's certain things that come into play that makes this the case. And the best interest duty is one. Brokers, they can do it now, but come 1 January, because the legislation will be enacted, brokers will have to comply from that date. The opportunity to go to people and say, look, I've always acted in your best interest. But now there's this piece of legislation and all that's around it that if I don't, I'm going to get fined $1 million and maybe 12 times over if I breach them all. We won't have that conversation, but you know, I am now, there's a piece of legislation here that insists that this entire sector acts this way, but the banks don't. Banks aren't under its legislation. So there is an opportunity there. And what we're doing is we're putting together right now, actually, I'm just finalising the draft of what we call a 101 best interest duty guide for implementing 101 best practice guide for implementing a best interest duty in your business. And for God's sake, I hope someone can come up with a shorter name than that for me. It's like this.
We need
long.
an acronym.
SHI. No, we won't go there.
Yeah. We'll come up with something.
But it's all about understanding what the law is and how the law applies to you and your business. It's not the solution as to how do I meet that obligation. That's your aggregator will say, you need this form, you need to do this, this, and this. And I can tell you now, every conversation I've had with ASIC, and there's been many of them, and it's actually more so during the COVID period. So everything's done like this, digitally through screen. There's no downtime with travel or anything like that. So conversations are more regular.
Yeah.
But every time they say, how does a broker apply? There is one single answer every single time, and that's documentation. Mm-hmm. So your documentation, it always has been, but it's even going to be more so keen to be able to argue and to debate, did you meet a best interest duty obligation with your client? And that is unquestionably where they're standing. But the leverage it gives us as an industry to say, we do this, they don't. Our guide will explain that interplay, and it will also talk about the interplay between not just RG 273, which is your regulatory piece for bid, or your guidance piece for bid, but also the interplay between responsible lending obligations and also DDO, design and distribution orders, design distribution obligations that the lenders are under, because these things actually come together to formulate the total piece. And so there'll be a part of that in this guide, and that'll come out mid to late August at the latest. Then in October, we're doing a series across the country, digitally across the country, mm-hmm. On an educational piece on the best interest duty, and explain further, the obligation of the best interest duty, which is, if you like, that practical piece, putting the client's interest in front of yours, and then how that then crosses through to RG 209 on responsible lending obligations, which is almost the technical credit piece. And I know it's more than that, but just in a little box. And then this DDO, design and distribution obligations, which is actually a lender's piece saying that this product is not crap, but you as a broker need to know that it has met the DDO standard as well. And all these things come together. Your aggregators will do the other pieces to how they want to see it comply. But we'll do a piece of webinar series on that in October, because it's a balance between don't want to leave it too late, but don't want to do it too soon that we forget about it before we get there. So we're sort of balancing that out. But what we have done on the way through, once RG 273 finalised and came out, we have written back to ASIC and we have challenged them on a piece of the regulatory guide, and we've pointed out to them, and in a meeting that they were there, right in front of me and others, which was held in Parliament House in Canberra just before lockdown. It was the end of, it was early February. Government through Treasury explained the intent of government through the best interest duty, through the Act and the explanatory memorandum. We thought we're all on across that page, and ASIC puts out the final of RG 273 and go, oh, wait a second, you knew this piece is not what it's meant to be. You've taken it and gone, send it right up there, which is somewhere it's not meant to be. So we've written to them and said, you've not acted with the intent of government in a nice, polite way. This is what the intent was. This is what was discussed. Here's the regulatory guide, or here's the piece within the Act and the explanatory memorandum, because my regulatory writer is ex-ASIC. So through this process, the FBAA was actually asked to rewrite a piece of the law for Treasury to make sure this thing played out right. Treasury didn't necessarily act in the way that it should have, but because it's nothing to do with me, it's just the guy that we engage who sits behind us, he's ex-ASIC, he can write in their language. It's like talking to people in court, you get papers from a court and go, I've got no idea what this means,
Oh, yeah.
So he's the man for that. So we went back with all those bits and pieces, and ASIC have acknowledged it. We're waiting for that to finalise, and when it finalises, we'll let you know all about it. But there's a couple of pieces there that should never have gone to where they went. We probably say there's a lot of things, but there's also a lot of things we're just going to have to suck up and live with, unfortunately. But we'll see. Hopefully we'll get that right, or at least we'll have a position in the future. If something goes to court, we'll be able to actually buy into that conversation and said, well, they didn't act with the intent of government, which is when bills are written, you have the bill and you have this explanatory memorandum. An explanatory memorandum is designed to explain the intent of law under which that bill is sitting. And that's the intent of government. So, yeah.
Is that what ASIC and the regulators will then take to go out and try to, I suppose in practical terms, enforce it, or to have conversations with brokers and industry bodies to explain how it's supposed to work? Is that what
that's all done?
That is? That's done.
That was done with Treasury. We did that all the way up to Christmas and into early February. So that discussion piece was done at a Treasury level, because that's where the law's written. ASIC comes in after the piece and enforces the law, but they have this ability to say, it's a bit like industry association codes, right? You sort of have, this is the benchmark, and we might come in here, for example, just a little bit above. Well, ASIC says this is the benchmark of the bill or the explanatory memorandum, but they've not come here with something. They've gone, well, they say, hey, back down here, fellas. You know, that's the government said, don't go there, but you did. So come back here.
Right.
So we're punching away on that one. And look, at the end of the day, the best interest duty, even if nothing changed from what we know, it still is a positive thing for the industry and can play out in a very positive way. There's just some things in there that, in my terminology, can put unnecessary tripwires in front of people. And I do not believe, and never will believe, that that's an appropriate thing to do. You know, it's not how things are meant to be played, to intentionally create obstacles that you know people are going to fall over and have no ability to get around it.
What are some of those things that you guys have spotted that might be one of those unintentional, tripwires?
One in particular is the bundled product position, right? So government said the intent was that in a bundled product, the provision of a best interest duty would be applied to the predominant debt. The regulatory guide has come out and says it applies to every product that's being supplied within a bundled product. Now, if I get a home loan and the bank automatically gives you a credit card and that's a part of the bundle, I have no say over that. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's not my call. I don't get a position in it. I can't say, oh, no, you just don't take. Well, you can say to them, don't take it, I guess, but it's just a given. So there is no guidance that a broker can give on that. It's different if somebody comes to a broker and says, I want to get a credit card. Well, then you're going to be captured by best interest duty. But this bundled product thing is something that somebody could come back on brokers after the event through court of law and say, well, how did you act? And the argument would be, prove to me how you acted in my best interest in relationship to the credit card. Forget the home loan, the credit card. And you can't do it. It's not possible. Not in a bundled product. So that was one of the major things we said to them, that is not the intent of government. And government explained this to you. I sat there in the room whilst that happened. Bar the fact we'd already written it in documents in December. So they go.
Well, I guess they're going to try everything on, won't they? I mean, at the end of the day, they'll push as much as we'll push.
Yeah. And a part of the balance is, we also got to remember that they are not practitioners in our industry. And so, for me, I'm not a theorist. And I've said this to ASIC since I started this stuff. From 2008, I started working with regulators. And I said to them, I'm not a theorist. I never will be. So don't think I'm going to come at you as a theorist. I'm not going to talk to you like a theorist. I'm a practitioner these days. I think I'm now into my 42nd year. There's only one man who's older than me, and I can see him there with the initials SD in a red jumper. But we won't. I'll leave you alone there, Mr. D. But you know what I mean? It's sort of like, this is where I'm going to look at it from. And they don't. They look at it from a theorist position by way of governance of law. And so you get these imbalances. And it's a matter of being able to work cooperatively and in an appropriate manner to sort of say, well, let's come back here because this is really what was designed. And government has been very bullish and very publicly vocal on the fact that they firmly believe in the broker marketplace. They don't want to see it destroyed. It was part of their positioning why they backstepped away from the original provision out of the Royal Commission. They shouldn't have gone there anyway, but But yeah, that's another story.
Well, I think there were some
party
people
history.
that were in the Royal Commission that wanted to see it go that way to deflect from their own inadequacies and failings, I suggest. But yeah. Now, you mentioned there
right.
just now that, the banks are not going to, or they're under a different sort of regime than we are. So
Yep.
I haven't really thought this through a great deal, but is this going to create any sort of, unintended differences between the broker channel and the banking channel?
It does. And so the banks act under the banking code, the Bankers Code of Practice, right? Bank Code of Practice, and that's fine, and that's where they default to, and say, well, we've already do all these things because of. But also too, you got to remember, practically, it's impossible for any bank to act under a best interest duty because they can't tell you the competitor 2 doors down has got a product that's cheaper, more flexible, and more appropriate for you. Because I'm just blinkered on what I'm doing. I'm a mono-stream product provider. I can only tell you about what the bank does. That's all I know.
Yeah.
I'm not employed to do anything else to sell my competitor's product. So it's impossible for them to meet a best interest duty. The thing they do need to do, and they probably test that they do anyhow, but the thing a bank does need to do is to say, sorry, I can't help. Yeah, my product is not going to help you out. My product under a responsible lending obligation is completely unsuitable for you. Now, that's where bankers do need to set up, and that's a part of that RG 209 piece that they are encapsulated on making sure a product is not unsuitable.
Banking
So
Royal
there's
Commission
that.
Part 2 in about 5 to 7 years is already seeds of that are being sowed, because I think, do you reckon any branch managers ever going to say that to a client?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing. And you're possibly right there, PJ. God forbid the last 2 years turned me as white as a ghost in the grey hair division, but the next one will probably make me go bald, I would dare say.
Well, I hope not. I mean, it's better to have gray hair than no hair. Isn't that right, Dinty?
Yeah, Mr. D. Yeah, he's with it.
He's with it. Absolutely. Now, I just
the
want to
other thing though, PJ,
yeah.
sorry, before we leave that, can I just say there's one really important piece. What we've got to watch with best interest duty, and I am in a Zoom meeting with the Federal Treasurer on Monday night, Josh Frydenberg, and I've tabled this as one of a few questions I have for him that I need answering on, is that with the delays in loan assessments at the moment through the broker channel, we've got evidence of 40 to 50 days, documentation out of banks are saying, maybe 30 days on a refinance and shorter timeframes on purchases. But when banks are turning around brokers' applications in 30 to 40 days, just as a number, yet through their branch network, they're turning it around in 5, maybe 6 days. Under a best interest duty, if I'm a broker and I know that bank, when I give it to them, is going to take 40 days to turn for an assessment, not a settlement, for an assessment of my loan, but that same bank's branch will do it in 5 days, what's my duty under a best interest obligation? Go to your branch. Banks can leverage that as being anti-competitive. And I've actually used those words to Josh Frydenberg, that this is an anti-competitive practice in today's world and has a much greater implication to brokers once formally the best interest duty comes into play in 1 January. And this cannot be allowed to happen. Banks need to, regardless of any conversation you want to have the same processing times, whether it's through their proprietary channels or through their third-party channel. Otherwise, they are being anti-competitive in disadvantaging brokers all around Australia, where we have proven, not only, it doesn't matter which piece of data you want to look at, but the majority of home buyers, of home borrowers in Australia want to use a broker. Whether that's 50%, 51%, 57%, doesn't matter. It's still at least half or the greater half want to use a broker. Right? And I believe that will go to 70% and above in the coming years. And I reckon we can achieve 70% in a 5-year time frame. Talk to me in 5 years' time and tell me whether I'm an idiot or not. But the simple reality is we will get there, regardless of the time.
Yeah.
But this cannot be allowed to happen. So I've addressed it with the Treasurer together with another piece, and I'll be interested to see where it lands. But this cannot happen. Now, we are seeing banks publicising in the media, in the industry, saying that processing times are coming down, or they're employing 1,000 people onshore to do their processing. My question is, if it takes 30 days through a broker network and your branch can do it in 6 days, Who gives a shit where your processing is? If you can do it in the branch today, you can do it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
It's one of those debates that go, guys, this needs to be right and fair, because they built our sector. I go back to, I saw in the media the other day, one of the banks is shutting down, I think so it's 1,500 branches or something in regional marketplaces, which is a great thing for brokers in Australia. Shut the branches down, go to your broker. Another reason why those numbers will go up with market penetration. But that happened in around 1995, right? Banks shut branches right across Australia. And that was the stepping stone for brokering in Australia to take this quantum leap up. That's why I say 70% and above is highly achievable. Between that and getting the best interest duty and this interplay with settlements, assessments, loan assessments, right? These three things together can create an enormous step up for brokers in Australia, and they need to get ready for it.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like it. And certainly, you know, you've got me thinking about that. And I do recall times when branches have cut back on, or banks have cut back on all their branch staff and, you know, cut all that stuff. And you just think, why haven't they done it before? Because, you know, I've always argued that the broker has got to be one of the most effective and least expensive sales forces that these guys have. And why aren't they actually wrapping their arms around us? I mean, some lenders are obviously, but why aren't they all wrapping their arms around the broking channel and going, you know, you're the preferred method to distribute our product, you know, like.
Well, your non-banks are around 70% of distribution through brokers.
Of course,
I go back, I set up Rams Home Loans in 1993. I set up their first sales office.
Right.
And when we were progressing in those early days, and it was a long time ago, so don't get me wrong, but it was 50% cheaper to originate a loan through a broker network than it was through a retail branch network. And the retail branch network is a fixed cost. Whether they write business or not, you own the cost to run it. Whereas a broker network, they don't do anything. Well, the cost is negligible to nothing. So.
And on that point, I mean, I want to jump to clawback in a moment, but one last question sort of on what you were just discussing there is what came to mind is the levels that banks offer, the service levels that banks offer brokers who write a lot of business with them. Will we see, you know, for additional, not additional, but what's what I'm looking for, just, you know, getting assessments done quicker. So we're going to see that sort of stuff disappear?
I hope so. Under report 516 from ASIC on broker remuneration, I said that, and I'll just call it out, broker clubs need to go. I was completely against in the volume driven. It was creating bad outcomes or the risk of bad outcomes. And I guess I look at things slightly differently. So I tend to look at things from a regulatory lens and say that incentivizes the risk of a bad outcome. Doesn't mean it is, and I don't believe it does, but it risks those who may do wrong to go down that path. So there was moves made through industry, through the combined industry forum, which is really good. And sort of, you know, tried to get it back to being analysis more that is qualitative based, not quantitative based. But today, and I have the evidence here right with me, and as a part of that conversation I'm having with Josh Frydenberg, is that, you know, if depending on what club level you're at or not at, that processing time can vary from, you know, 8 days to 30 days. Now, the problem I have with that, who gives a shit how much volume or how good a loans you write is, or however that matrix works, and it's still largely volume, regardless of what industry's tried to do. I've got the documented proof on my laptop. It's still volume based, right? But who cares? You've got a borrower out there, regardless of whether I give a bank 1 loan a year or 3 loans a month, it's got nothing to do with the client. Why should the client be disadvantaged with this delay just because? And they could be the best client on the planet, right? Might be the best client, the best borrower that gets introduced to this bank that they've ever seen. They don't know. But we are unfairly disadvantaging the client at the front end with these club networks. And I don't believe it's right. And no one can convince me otherwise. And I know, like I said, the CIF did a great job in trying to balance this thing out, but it hasn't worked. And what will happen, and it's only a matter of time, ASIC will come back in and go, punch. I'm trying to take some, if you like, some preemptive moves to not directly, but more so the habit of delay, regardless of what the delay is, needs to go. It needs to be fairly treated for all. And in all honesty, with brokers, if your loan files aren't up to speed And that means you get slow turnaround times, more for you. You need to get it right first time because it's the right thing to do by your borrower. If nothing else, don't take shortcuts. And I'm sure nobody here does, but I hear about it all the time.
I'd have to wonder too, you know, with the volume thing, if ASIC would just go straight to those banks that have those clubs, ask for the list of brokers that are in those clubs, go to those brokers and say, let's look at your files and see if you're actually acting in the best interest of clients, or are you just funneling all this business to a lender for whatever, you know. There's some unintended consequences there, and certainly a bit of a, you know, a problem, I suppose, that could be
unquestionably so. ASIC has been very public on the fact that how negative they view steering, and that's steering. Right, I'm pushing you that way, whether it's for volume, whether it's for incentive, or whatever the reason is, to hold my club membership, that's steering, and ASIC is vehemently against it. So yeah, you're right, PJ, watch out, because one day it'll happen, because ASIC's job is to audit. They look at what's going on, we create, we start to police this bit of policy, and a part of that policing mechanism is I need to audit it. When I start drilling, that can go to some pretty dark places.
Now, just on that, I mean, do you think we're going to see, or has it been indicated that we're going to see ASIC doing more of their regulatory role and getting out there and auditing brokers and doing that sort of stuff? Because they've been pretty, you know, like in the entire 18 years I've been in this industry, or 19, whatever it is now, it's been, let's just say it's been pretty relaxed, you know, and it seems like all of a sudden they're really going to, you know, get out there and focus more on our community and do that. What do you reckon?
Yeah. Look, I agree. I would say that I think ASIC has done a fair bit of auditing. Most of the reports we see come off an auditing and review process. So, you know, and they've done a whole lot of shadow shopping last year. They've done various investigations that are still happening at this moment to formulate new pieces of legislation. We don't read about it. We don't see it that often because it gets targeted this way or that way, but many aggregators will tell you that ASIC's come to them, they've had to give this data and all this information out. So they do. But I guess too, when you're in this world that we find ourselves in, where we're working remotely from home, or you know, whatever the arrangements are, it probably does create an environment where a lot more of that auditing can be done. And in some cases, very simply, in fact, you know, nobody's got travel time if you're working from home. Yeah. So that the time efficiencies are far better. So that creates more capability to do more. I'm sure ASIC will probably say they've got enough on their plate, but
yeah, no kidding.
I wouldn't surprise me, PJ.
Can I ask a quick question just on that? Because you know that's my favourite topic. With regards, Peter, what's your view on, because obviously with aggregators, they do their own auditing, as we know, as a support thing. But I mean, with the ACL holders, I'm interested to know how that's all going to happen. And apart from QED, are there any pre-ASIC auditing companies that, you know, brokers can outsource to or engage with?
Sure, yeah. So as far as an auditing capability goes, there are multiple companies out there. QED Risk is one. There is you know, PwC actually doing a lot of auditing in the industry, especially with the aggregators at the moment, with an agreed auditing regime that they need to go through on I think it's on an annual or biannual or 6-monthly basis. There are people, Compliance One is another group that does that sort of measure. Probably doesn't have the industry focus as much because they're mainly in the consultancy world, but they're expanding that as well to be able to do audit and compliance work for brokers. I can't think of other names, but there are multiple companies out there that do it. You got to be a little bit careful. Some of the aggregators are saying back to us is the obligations or the conversations they're having with ASIC are saying, you can't outsource this. You need to be doing it internally. I actually think you'll see a stronger flow to be done internally because as the ACL holder, the law points at you, right? It doesn't point at the credit rep. It doesn't point at a third party. It points squarely as you as the credit license holder. And the obligation is on you to make sure you are doing the right thing. If you farm that out elsewhere, it doesn't mitigate the point of law, which is directly you. So if the outsourced company, the external third party, screws up, doesn't matter. You own it. It's your problem. You're the license holder.
So the only ones that can really sign off officially is ASIC.
Yeah, I
apart,
guess, yeah, you can look at it that way. Yeah.
yeah, overall. So at the end of the day, I guess, you know, it's because, you know, where do you draw the line with processes? Like, what's the broker responsibility? You've got your loan processing services, and then I think sometimes there might be a little bit of muddy borders there as to who's doing what, but we know who's responsible at the end of the day. So I mean, that's also a
Yeah, well,
fun
the
one to
credit
tackle.
rep is credit rep's directly responsible for the licensee. The licensee is directly responsible to make sure the credit rep's doing their job. That's sort of the loop of it. And as I said a bit earlier, you know, the key thing going forward from an asset point of view, if you like, for your compliance is documentation. Make sure your documentation is thorough and had it. And I must admit, I mean, I haven't been a broker since, what was it, just about 2009 era, I think, when I was last broking. But in this day and age, I'd even be looking at videoing my meetings. And the reason for that is, what's written down is one thing. People can argue that, so I didn't agree with it. Well, get them to sign it. Oh, yeah, I was forced to sign it. People can do audio recordings, but you don't see the body language. You don't see the head nodding or the head scratching. You don't see those characteristics. But if I video it, I can see them, I can hear them, and I can watch them sign and go, yes, I agree. And you've got to get the okay to do that. So don't get me wrong. But I see this as apologies, a bit of background noise. I suffer from chronic hay fever, so I've got to get somebody to do my lawns. Bastard's just shown up. Sorry.
Thanks, Peter. Anyway, it's coming to that anyway. So.
Yeah, so that's what I'd be doing. So
that's something we've certainly talked about before in terms of doing recordings and all that. I love it. I think it's a great way to document stuff. So I'm glad you're saying that as well. I wanted to just come around to clawbacks, because this is an issue that I kind of have a problem with. And I want to see what your thoughts on all of it are. I know we cannot now ask for clawback to be refunded by the client, which I think is a shame. I'm not sure where, how our industry is viewing all of that, but what are the current, I suppose, conversation points and discussion topics around clawback, and how we as an industry can protect against the clawback?
Mate, sorry, it's just gotten very loud. Hopefully Janet's got them. Sorry for that.
That's okay.
So from a clawback position, we tackle this very strongly with government, and I've been very loud since, or before I moved up to Brisbane. So, that puts it in the late 2000 era of how much against I am on clawbacks. And my position's unchanged. If you do the wrong thing, we're not talking about, if you commit fraud, you're clean and clear. You're not. You own whatever the penalty is. But if you've done nothing wrong, then you shouldn't be suffering from a clawback, right? I'm completely there. Government was very specific. We tackled this through the period in running the best interest duty and the complications of that interplay. And, we said that you can't have a best interest duty. We did try, based on some data, to have it pulled back to only apply for the first 12 months. Then after 12 months, all bets are off. But government turned around and said, well, look, you're lucky it's only 2 years and it's not longer. Some industries have 5, 10, 15 years, and they're going, really? I don't know that. Regardless of industry. So we actually told you the people we do a lot of research with, unfortunately COVID's impacted this a little bit, but to get them to start and do a research piece around what other industries in Australia have clawbacks and how long are they for and how do they operate. I know what happens internationally. As you know, I chair the IMBF, so through our Global Board of Governors, we've got the research there from what I did in 2016, and we're updating that at the moment so we can talk globally on clawback issues. The one problem is that we are one of the few countries in the world that have clawbacks. Now that's a plus, but it also weakens the argument a bit as far as exempling. So we're looking at the Australian sector as well and other industries. So it doesn't happen in any other industry like you think. And this is completely unreasonable. It's commercially unfair. It should never have been here to this fashion. It needs to still go. Now, there are moves through like the Combined Industry Forum, having a conversation around this, which is potentially a lender conversation, very early days and really yet to even have a first formal meeting on it. But there's a discussion happening there, which is a good thing. Where I've got the political side of it spinning around a bit, but there's no easy answer to it at this point in time, except we've got to keep fighting it and it needs to go. It's a terrible thing. It was brought in part for the right reason, but then the reason for clawback changed. If you go back to when clawbacks first started, the intent was about churning portfolios. That's what the word churn was about. It was portfolio movement. I take all my clients from here and I bang them over there. It was never about the one transaction. So under a best interest duty, where I'm dealing with one transaction, this bloody clawback thing should never apply. If I churn a book, that's a part of breaching agreement. So you're going to own that problem. If I commit fraud, you're going to own that problem as well. But that's what it was built around, was portfolio movement, not the one transaction. So unfortunately for now, it is what it is, and we need to understand that. And we keep working towards various moves to actually get it gone.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've never really understood clawback from the point of view that, you know, the whole churn argument. I was around when that was being put forward, and I thought, how does a broker churn, you know, $100 million book? Like, that's a lot of effort, and the client has to be willing to want to churn. You know, it just, and then it was proven that it didn't really exist anyway. I remember you leading the charge on that, and you know, all sorts of studies and statistics that were thrown out there. So good. Well, that's great. I think obviously we do as an industry need to continue to agitate on that and address it, because my view is we should not have a clawback, or it should be very short, or it should be, you know, amortized over 12 months and just, you know, running down every month the loan is on the book. It should get lower and lower. Anyway, let's move on to what's happening in the industry. So let's go back to a macro level and maybe talk about new entrants, or, you know, people exiting the industry. What are you finding from the FBAA's point of view in terms of new memberships and what's happening there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When we look at it year on year, there's no discernible difference about the number of people leaving. Yeah. What there is greater transparency on that reason. They say, bloody COVID or whatever, Royal Commissions, whatever you want to blame it on. There is a greater transparency as to why there's not this massive increase over and above a year on year basis. And it is generally that, you know, if I was going to retire, I was, you know, okay, this may be just a reason I may have bought it for 12 months, but there's not like there's a massive exodus. Even when I look at ASIC's data. So when we look at sizing the industry, we do it differently to the MFAA. We actually go back to the regulators' data. Again, I tend to look at things through a regulatory lens and say, well, it doesn't matter if you write one loan a year. The law has you encapsulated in what, well, it has it embellished in what you do. So when you look at that, the numbers which need to be updated in a couple of months' time still hadn't moved much post the Royal Commission. So we've got this constant inflow and outflow, and we're actually seeing at the moment, as we said earlier about volume of business going along quite well for a lot of people. People are actually coming to the industry, not like it was. I can tell you it's dropped by about 90% to what I see, because we get the lion's share of new entrants into the market because of the streamlined process we put in through our app. So basically when you apply, you finish and hit the button and it's done. It's on your certificates on your email.
Right.
But yeah, that certainly has dropped, but there is an inflow. We still have, touch wood, positive growth week on week. And we monitor that very, very closely because of what's going on. So the industry's quite strong and resilient. And when I say positive growth, it's not huge numbers, by the way, but when you go through a pandemic, you go into doomsday mode and say, well, shit, if the business goes like this, yeah, when does it hit the bin sort of thing? So we did all that planning and continuity planning and so on. But yeah, so we sort of say, well, if we can float along like this or a little bit like that, then it's a good thing in this particular marketplace. So yeah, it's like I said, it's not like there's any discernible, you know, amount of people getting out, more so than what we'd normally expect. Yeah, it has its normal flow.
Is there any, do you have any metrics or any predictions on when we might see the bubble of the, you know, the older cadre of mortgage brokers leaving the industry and creating some sort of, you know, shortage? I mean, guys like Dinty are going to, I think, die in the chair, but, you know.
You beat me to it. I was about to defer to Mr. Dinty to comment. Look, I actually don't, be honest with you. You know, as much as, yeah, there's a body of people get to a certain age and leave, there's a younger body coming through, and that middle sector is coming up as well. So it's a constant flow. So I look at the total number, and it's fairly static to, we've gone through all this growth from the 90s, 2000s, and so on, from that past era, and we sort of hit this sort of leveling. And when I look at it globally, our percentage of brokers per population that would borrow money is pretty common throughout the world. So we're not like we're too high, too low. We're sort of bouncing around an average situation. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Goldilocks,
all
it's
works out.
just right.
Well, yeah, it could be a little bit either way, but it's not like it's a million miles one direction. It's not like we've got way too many brokers per head of borrowing a population.
Yeah.
Not like that. Or we're way too low numbers. It's nothing like that at all. We're sort of
Yeah.
sitting around a reasonable sort of position.
I might, we've got about 10 more minutes, so I might just open it up now to the floor. I know we've had a couple of questions come in, but guys, look, if you have a question for Peter, please maybe put your hand up and I can just have a quick scan and yep. So Laurie, jump in, bud.
Peter, thanks for your presentation, and all the best with Josh next week. Mine's a quick question. Whether you mentioned before about credit cards being added onto the loan and so on. If I put an application in and I don't ask for a credit card, and the bank gives them one anyway, does that impact on my best interest duty?
Yeah, that's part of the problem, because the duty says that every facility they take under a bundled product, it doesn't define how they got it. It says every facility they take, you've got to apply a duty to. This is a part of why we lobbied prior to this and had the government agreements on it, that it only applied to the predominant debt, not the total package, right? And that's fair. So, okay, well, the prominent debt, look, it could be a credit card, but who's going to have a $50,000 credit card and a $5,000 home loan? You know what I mean? So it minimised the risk of that happening and say, well, yeah, 99.99% of the time, it will be the home loan, and then there may be other things underneath it. The predominant debt was the home loan. That was the position. And unfortunately, when the RG finalised, that's not what it says. So there's the ambiguity in it, Laurie, that becomes the question and the challenge. And the reality is they don't talk about what you offered or what you didn't offer. They talk about the bundle. Yeah. So what we've got to do is get rid of the ambiguity, because I can see on your face, get it defined right, but get it put back on track where it says, okay, look, it makes sense when it looks like this. It doesn't make sense when it looks like that.
Thank you for that question, Laurie. Anyone else have a question? You want to jump in? Put a hand up. Brock, yep, go ahead, bud.
Hey, Pete, how are you?
Good, mate, and you?
Yeah, good. A little while ago, you raised the issue about these, wonderful special 2-year fixed rates and the concern. How does that reflect for a broker with best interest? Look, as a lender, we're being wiped out because, everyone's jumping on the 2-year fixed rate, which is fair enough. But the comparison rate, which is what they're supposed to look at, doesn't compare. Like next year when this best interest duty comes in, how much of a play does that sort of thing come in for a broker?
Well, this is the analysis that the broker has to do. They've got to evaluate. This is a part of working out whether or not the product is unsuitable for the borrower, or not unsuitable, I should say, and that it is acting in the best interest of their client. So there's a financial analysis that has to go with it. Say, well, if you take the fixed rate, it has this impact, this cost, whatever. If in 2 years' time you want to put a pool on, if you use this particular product, there's a huge penalty to get out of a 3-year fixed rate in 2 years' time. Good luck trying to equate that, because I don't think the bank will give you the maths for it. There's all these complications that you have to apply into an assessment with you give your guidance back to the borrower. And it's a real difficulty, to be honest with you. This is, again, it falls back to the aggregator's responsibility, how they're going to deal with that. But as far as the way the law is written, and it's why we're taking the approach with our educational series now, 101 guide. So I said, yeah, and the guide will be free to everyone. Right? It doesn't matter where your membership is or isn't. It'll be freely available off the homepage of our website once it's done. Give it a few more weeks, and so the education will be free to everyone to attend. But you've got to understand how the law is written, and then you've got to try and work out how you're going to apply to that law. And the fixed rate conversation is one, because just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's good. We all know that, and it may work perfectly fine for that person, but unless you've done a thorough due diligence and analysis of their circumstances, a financial modelling as to how this may or may not play out for them versus what they want to achieve with their goals in the short term, medium term, and so on. If you put somebody into a product that is unsuitable, you're going to start breaching responsible lending obligations. So this is why we talk about this interplay between these three pieces of legislation: DDO, RG209, and what we now know as RG273. We've got to understand how these things twist, and it's not an easy job. But I tell you what, as an industry, if we get it right, this is why you are the professionals, and this is what will rocket you to that 70 to 80% market penetration, because you will be unquestionably the specialist in the marketplace, can work through this minefield of conversation. It's not going to be easy, so don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting it will, but a bit of common sense, bit of a steady hand, methodically working through it, have structure. And if you have structure, so a process, and you work to that, doesn't matter what happens, you've got that in place to fall back on.
Done.
Thank you. Denty, you got
No, I didn't
3
see
minutes.
that. I didn't see that hand. These are going to be too hard.
You can have a 3-minute intro, mate.
Yeah, I think so. Pete, great to see you. And could I, before I even ask the question, I just want to say it's great to see Leah looking beautiful as always. Yeah, smile, that's a girl. Pete, situation, I am handling a refinance for you and Janet, and I'm going to put you with XYZ lender. And I know, well, before I've even started that, I've told you to ring your bank and find out what sort of rate, best rate they could do for you. And you've come back to me and said, Steve, they're going to give me XYZ. And I go, oh, look, mate, I can take you to a different lender and get you a better deal that is more not unsuitable. And at the same time, I know that if you contacted your current bank's retention team, they would offer you even better, sharper interest rates, deals, maybe even some cash back, whatever. Best interest duty, it left me out on a limb. Your thoughts?
It does. No, it does. It all comes about what you know. And if you know there is still a better deal through the retention team, you are obliged and obligated under law to advise the client of that. I don't agree with it, but that's the reality of it. So, and that does you out of the business. But if you're going to put them, if you told them to go through division anyhow, back to the bank, yeah, I guess you're halfway there regardless. But yeah, the simple reality is if they've gone to the wrong department and haven't got the right answer and you believe they can get a better answer, you are legally obligated in acting under the best interest of the client. And the whole idea of a best interest duty is the client's interests come first, not the remuneration to your pocket. If you think of that as the underlying stream to this, then you've got to tell them. But you can't tell them what you don't know. So if you don't know, you don't know, right? But if you do, then you have to.
Peter, can I make a comment on that? For a long time, I've told my clients when they look to go to a refinance, I've told them to go to the other bank and tell them they've been talking to me and I've offered them a certain rate and see if they can beat that rate. Quite often, I believe in what goes around comes around, or the other way around. And quite often I get massive referrals just because of saying that. And quite often they go to the bank and it doesn't work anyway. And then you can look them in the eye and say, right, I did the right thing. And that has really worked for me.
I think
that's a really great point. It's a really great point that, what goes around comes around. You do the right thing by someone, you may not get that deal, but the opportunity of referrals are the deals that you do right. And I know Steve writes a lot of referral business because of the way he conducts himself professionally in the marketplace, as you do, Laurie. These are the ebbs and flows of things. Sorry, Michelle.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, in that case, is it always about the rate? Because, there's a lot of rate chasers. So sometimes that isn't their best solution for them at the time.
Correct. Yeah. So it's what's in, and I know this sounds very cliche and it will do for a long time, it's what's in the best interest of the client. However that schemes. Now, one thing we have taught ASIC, it's not always about rate. Took us a long time to get there. And it's still not completely out of their conversation, but dynamically it has changed from where it was.
Ultimately, I suppose it's going to be a case of when this gets tested in a court case or something like that to see how the regulators and the judiciary branch falls, in terms of their view on it. So
yeah, well, you look at the Westpac, what they call it, the Shiraz and Wagyu case on ham. Yeah, Westpac stood their ground, and in all honesty, we wrote a paper just before that, not knowing this was happening. We actually agreed with Westpac's position, not ASIC's. And now ASIC we're going to attack, and they've decided to leave it alone. So, yes, these things will probably get tested in court, but if we're doing the right thing for the right reasons, and it's an argument I had with ASIC at one stage saying, again, on the HEM conversation, who said people can't change their habits? I remember when I was first lending in the late 70s and through the 80s in the banking system, you'd say, sorry, you can't afford the loan, you need to go save, X amount of money for your deposit. 6 months later, be back, they had their deposit, they changed their habits, oh, your loan's approved. Yeah, this bullshit of saying that people can't change their habits is just completely wrong. And I think it's taken time, but that message is also starting to get through. And the Westpac case actually proves and supports that from a regulatory environment. And the whole HEM discussion, I know how controversial it is, but really, to me, HEM in principle should go, and it's all about telling the truth. You can't argue the truth. The truth is what the truth is. So if it's up there, or if it's down there, it's the truth, and it's proven truth. You might say HEM becomes a, Nissan, he likes Shiraz, sorry, I just saw his comment pop up. HEM may be a bottom end mark, excuse me. So like that's the lower limit or something like that, I don't know. But I always get concerned when we sort of do some of these things and we forget about, it's actually about the truth. And that is what it is.
Yeah.
Further to what Michelle was saying.
Sorry, we're just on time, Greg. So just hold that for 1 second. I just wanted to, Peter, you happy to stick around for a few more minutes and answer a couple?
Yeah, mate, no, I'm good.
Okay. Yep. All right. In that case, Greg, fire away, bud.
Further to what Michelle was saying about that situation where you send someone back to ANZ, you can't know whether ANZ is a better deal until you've done all their research and assessments. So until we find out all about the client and their situation, they may have some sort of glitch in their situation. The ANZ deal won't work. So
that's right.
We should do all that first.
Yeah, there's no argument about that. That's part of that due diligence process. And the reality may be a client, even if it's a refinance, so if you're getting purchased, but even if it's a refinance, needs to settle in 3 weeks' time. If it's going to take a bank, regardless of what it is, 30 days to start to assess the file, that's not in the best interest of the client. The best interest of the client is who's going to get this settled for me in 3 weeks' time, or even 4 weeks' time, but not take 30 days to start to look at it.
The key point on that is documentation, right? Is being clear, and Pete, maybe that's what you were going to say, is being clear in your documentation that is why you had to do this thing, so that 5 years later, they don't come back and go, you didn't act in my best interest, and you go, hang on, you needed settlement in 3 weeks, so.
That's exactly right, PJ. And I think a key thing, we're starting to talk about this getting tested in court. Think about the fact, I hope that doesn't happen. I'd hate to see a broker going through that process. Having said that, when and if it does, it will be probably several years after the loan was originated. And the thing most on people's minds will be the rates and those things, not the criteria that was important for that client at the time. The only place you can go to back yourself on that is your documentation. We've done it for years. We've done lots of great things for our clients, and we've put them in the right place. We've asked them all the good questions, and we probably were a bit sloppy on documentation, and nobody's ever come and looked in my files before. But the reality is that documentation, whilst it might be a bit of a pain in the backside, is predominantly, if you're already doing the right thing, it serves as your own protection more than anything else.
Your proof. Yeah, exactly. And just on that point, if anyone does wind up with someone saying they're going to take you to court, first thing you do, put it in the hands of your professional indemnity insurer and let them run it. Don't start the conversation because you'll breach your PI obligations, right? Let them run it and give it to them and sort of step aside. Just a little, because and I'm with Pete Clark. Hope like hell it doesn't happen. But the reality of numbers, and especially if we grow in penetration, that the likelihood is there that will happen. So you put it in the hands of your PI people. That's why it's there, and let them.
Glad you said that, Peter, because I think they're the things that aren't told to the brokers sometimes. And it's a matter of, hitting your compliance and complaints obligations and process and registers and things like that. And it's just like, shit, what do? was the first thing we do.
The first thing you do, bring your PI insurance, say this is yours, or send them an email.
It's also like you want to be working with a credit license holder, if it's not yourself, who has provides a great deal of support for you.
That's very true, Pete. Yeah, very true.
Good point. Well, Peter, you've been very gracious with your time and extending it. I want to conclude with one final question for you, and that is conference next year. Are we on for the Gold Coast, or what's going to happen, mate?
The burning question by many.
Leah's gone blue.
What will happen is come at this stage, October, you'll hear a lot more around this. So secret squirrel, right? None of you can tell anyone, otherwise I'm going to have to take your firstborn. You know that rule from me. So I trust all of you. No. What will happen is at this stage, it's got to be in July of next year is what we're aiming for. We can't do it this year. We have to have a venue that can seat 1,000 people. And it just doesn't happen at the moment. And we need borders open for people to come, because we have people from Western Australia, Tasmania, the Territory, all come to the conference. So we've got to have borders open. And as Leah will testify, and she's not allowed to because she's not actually working at the moment, are you, Leah? Is that once we've agreed to it and got it all approved through the board, there's a best part of an 8-month working time to actually make this thing happen. So it's impossible for us to do it this year. So we are tagging at this stage July, and at this point in time, that's when it will be, and it's going to be very cool. So I'm going to do something that Lee's going to hate me for. So the evening attire will be heroes and villains. So I want to know who's coming as Commissioner Hayne.
I don't know. Maybe we might have a few Josh Frydenberg lookalikes, or
Oh no, Josh is all right.
Come on, Stephen.
I'm going as Judge Perham because he's the new industry hero.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping nobody comes dressed as COVID, because if anyone does, I will send you away.
I don't know who that is. We'll ignore that.
I'll be going as Wonder Woman. I already have an outfit.
Oh, there you go.
Get your own character. That's fine.
If you had died, you hadn't said anything for the last hour. So thanks for jumping in there.
Oh, mate, we had a staff meeting last week. I had to cut her off. She was going on forever. She needs to get out.
Hey, Peter, do you have to be an FBA? Do you have to be an FBA double member to go to the conference?
No, it's open to everyone.
How much cost me to join anyway?
Join the FBAA. It's I can tell you right now, it's about $75 cheaper than the MFAA. We have not put up our prices. I announced this just as COVID started, and we hadn't put them up last year. So by the time we review them next year, it'll be 2 years. We've not reassessed our membership fees. $450 for a handsome gentleman like you.
Oh.
So $450, Laurie.
Thank you, Peter.
The conference.
Okay, still here?
No, he's gone. I saw him left earlier. Yeah, sorry, Zarko. It wouldn't change my conversation, I'm afraid.
No.
But the reality is the way we do the conference is, if you're not a member, there's a small fee. If you are a member, there's no fee to come during the day, but there is a fee for the nighttime. It's about $200. The nighttime cost for us is quite significant, and actually the whole days. I'll be very open with you. This thing costs us around $540,000 to put on each year. That's the expense. Now we meet the majority of that by sponsorship and a small ticket fee. So we actually make a loss on it every year. We had a great year last year. We only lost about 13 grand or 15 grand on it. We have lost 50 beforehand, but that's a part of our give back. Members pay a fee for something. So as far as I'm concerned, members have already paid for this. They shouldn't be paying twice, right? So that little rip up along the way is something we budget for every year, and I believe that's appropriate for it. I don't want to make money out of this because I think that's wrong. This is a part of the give back to industry and to our members. So that's how it runs. It is a very expensive exercise, but at the same token, it's one hell of a great time. We have a good time.
It's one of the best conferences during the year. We certainly, I am missing out, missing that we're going to miss it this year. So,
well, unfortunately, but yeah, it's that whole complication. If it was a smaller show, and I don't want to do digitally, to be honest with you, I actually want to get back together with people with this. Yeah, you could run a digital thing, and in my head, I go, no, I'm a bit more, I want to give Dinty a hug, I don't want to just wave at him through a screen, So there's that. And I can tell you now, the speakers that were already lined up, are the best. And it's almost like taking the best of the best over past conferences and bringing them all into one. It's going to be a great day of content, and it's going to be an absolute blast at Movie World at night, I can tell you.
That's fantastic. And for those of you in the room, you know, the IFBF always takes a contingent of IFBFers up to the Gold Coast. So, you know, please join us or let us know that you're going, because the more of us that attend, you know, representing the IFBF
I'm going this
in New
time.
South Wales, fantastic, the better, you know. So it's a blast, and it's an absolute blast. Guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up there because we're pushing 12:40, and I know all of you wonderful people have loans to write and settle and everything else. So let's give Pete a nice big clap for joining us today. Once again, I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Always
Thanks,
a pleasure
everyone.
to have you with us. And guys, we will let you know about the next meeting and location and everything else. But at this stage, assume that we will be back on Zoom in August unless otherwise notified. So everyone have a fantastic weekend. Thank you again. We'll see you all in a month. Cheers, everybody.
Announce who we've got a special speaker. PJ?
Yep.
Announce the special speaker.
Steve Denty will
I
be
can do
announcing
that.
our special speaker.
Okay, you go, Peter. You can announce who she is.
Your next month's special speaker is Senator the Honourable Jane Hume. Now, I know Jane very well. She is a lovely, lovely lady, very well skilled, an ex-banker. Her main portfolio these days is in financial services, so more so in the life and planning sector, but she's also the federal minister responsible for fintech in our industry. She has a great conversation. She was quite highly engaged with the with industry running in to the end of the best interest duty, putting it together. So she was there in Canberra talking to a lot of us there. And she's a great conversation. She's great conversation we'll have with Jane. I'm going to use this for a plugged in. And if you want to read a bit more about her, go to the FBAA's website, look at our previous magazine called Broker. Jane was on the cover of that, has a big feature story. It'll actually give you a good insight to her views on our industry, to be honest with you, putting everything else to one side. But Jane Hume, wonderful lady. You'll enjoy that. Be a good one.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Jane Hume, special guest next month. All right. Hey, everybody, have a great weekend. We'll see you soon. Take care.
That.